Spyro the Dragon, one of the figures of the first PlayStation, a precious memory for everyone who grew up playing it, and the game that started in Sonic Game's streak of great releases. And with the new wave of remaster, a good candidate for the big next combat. But we have realized over the years that the 3D platformers are tricky to pull off. 3D environment doesn't offer any advantage over 2D, only make things more complicated and harder to control. Overall, just slower. So we asked, was Spyro able to overcome this problem, or is it just another game hold by our memories? And stay around while we bring Spyro back into the modern days. This is Spyro the Dragon, years later. Spyro is not only a 3D platformer, it can be described as a collectathon. For those who are not familiar with the concept, a collectathon is a type of game where the objective is to acquire every single piece of everything it has to offer. Normally it goes like this: you complete a challenge and obtain a collectible, which will open new areas. With these areas you can get more challenges and more collectibles to open more areas, and so on. There is no standard how this challenge can be. They can be as easy or as hard as you want. There are two main rules you have to follow. 1. Completing the challenge must be a reward in and of itself. Getting the collectible has to be engaging. You won't play the challenge because you want the collectible, you will play the challenge because playing the challenge is fun. The collectible is just an added value. And 2. The more collectibles you have, the more options to explore and discover must become available. Linear progression is not an option. You must be able to jump back and forward between levels you have already completed, to either look for other challenges you haven't found, or to retry those who were too hard for you at the beginning. The final touch is a big level or smaller levels with enough contrast to keep the interest of the players. This is the basic layout for every single collectathon. The variety and difficulty of the challenge in the game will depend on the actions you can perform. The more actions you can perform, the harder and more complex the challenge can be. So, how Spyro fit into these basic models? Let's start looking at the collectibles. There are two main types: gems and dragons. The gems, called treasures, can be found pretty much everywhere in the world by performing any action. Just walk around, find some gems, break a pot, find some gems, jump, find some gems. There's no much of a challenge here, but they're only there to encourage exploration, which might not be a problem itself, except the dragons are pretty much the same. Instead of having a lot of gems every level, there's only like 3 or 4 dragons, but you will find them just by walking around a little. They're supposed to be hidden or in places difficult to access, but the platforming is never that tight, so the challenge is never that hard. This is a problem because there is not enough variety to keep the player interest in the long term. To access new area, you will be asked a certain amount of any of those, either gems or dragons, but because they are obtained the same way, you will probably have enough anyways. There's no reason just to go back and replay all levels you have already completed to obtain more. If you're looking for gems, you will probably find more dragons, and if you're looking for dragons, you'll probably find more gems. So there's not a lot to do in terms of replayability of every level. The game can be completed playing every single level in sequence without ever repeating, which is not something good in this kind of games. There might be a motivation to keep playing, to keep exploring new levels, but the levels here are really simplistic in layout and visuals. Most levels are only a single route with little detours that don't add too much. Most collectibles are just hidden along the main road, not a lot of exploration needed in that regard. It's always clear where the beginning and the end of the levels are. And again, that's not a problem itself, but here you're supposed to encourage more exploration. Try to lose yourself in the world as you go from the beginning to the end. In the visual department is also lacking. All levels merge together. The texture and ambience don't offer too much of variety when it comes to experience. A lot of it comes from the lack of detail in the textures. If you use brown for dirt and only brown with not much details, it's gonna get boring and repetitive after a little while. There's not a lot to this game. It feels really lacking in a lot of aspects. Even the story reason why everything happens is kind of just there. Okay, 3D platformers are not famous for their stories, but in here it's just like bad guy, dragon, game. It ends up feeling less like a game and more like a test of concept. It's built to work, and it did indeed work. But outside of that, there's not a lot to enjoy here. Actually, that I think that's it. Huh, this is kind of short. Okay, I got an idea. I'm gonna do something. Spyro 2 Riptus Rage. Well, the first game is the test of concept, the second game, the sequel, has to do the realization of the concept, right? So let's take a look. Let's start with the most obvious part. There's a little more world building. It's still pretty much bad guy, dragon game, but now there is more substance to it. The Spyro now have a personality, and there's a few side characters thrown here and there. There is a lot of detail put pretty much into everything here. The texture, the animation, every single particle, the motion of everything looks really good. It's true that some side characters don't look as good as they should, and a lot of enemies look stiff and feels like of motionless, but it's still a real improvement. The sound design is as it should be, every sound is where it needs to be, and it's a little better balanced this time. The controls are, well, not as good as they should be, but you have the option to tweak them a little so you feel a little more comfortable. Overall, visually and technically, it's as good as it can be. It's not going to blow your mind, especially considering what we have today, but out of that time, there's not a lot of things that plays or look as good as this one. Now let's focus into what's really important, the meat of the game, the gameplay. The first big change you will realize is that gems does not work as collectibles anymore. They are still there and you still need a certain amount of gems to keep progressing through the game, but it's not quite the same as before. Now they work a little more like a currency. Pay 200 gems to open a door, or pay 400 gems to learn how to swim. And you will gain them pretty much by just walking around, playing normally and repeating levels. There's no need for you to get out of your way to get more gems. The actual collectibles now comes in two forms, relics and orbs. Relics are your basic reward for completing a level. Go from the beginning to the end of the level, you get a relic. And talking about levels, let's talk about that for a moment. Levels in these games are freaking amazing. In every single aspect, from visuals to soundtrack to layout, all of them stand out. They even went as far as creating specific creatures and specific enemies for every single level. Every time you start a level for the first time, this little cutscene plays out, displaying you what's the conflict going on and what you have to do to complete it, and it's really fun, from restoring the water supply in the water level, or rescuing the baby turtles in the turtle level, or deactivating all the electrical gates in the Dr. Frankenstein rats level. I don't know, it's just fun and creative. It's just charming. The other collectibles are orbs, and here is where I think they nail the concept of the collectibles. Orbs cannot be found, they have to be given. Okay, some orbs can be found around the levels, but that's not the majority. The majority have to be earned by completing a specific task. Normally, you will find a character inside a level and he will tell you to complete something, either be a time trial or find 3 objects hidden around the world. This might not sound like a big deal, but it does allow you to create pretty much everything you want as a challenge. That means the variety of the challenges in here is really outstanding. They even found a way to make battling enemies really fun. Every time you defeat a certain amount of enemies in a level, you unlock a power-up that can be just throwing giant fireballs to fly. Yeah, even fly, and it's really good. And the icing on the cake is that this time, your actual boss fights in the game. They might not be the more challenging or rewarding of enemies, but they still serve their purpose. They are tests of the abilities you have obtained up to that point. They add even more variety to the game by being difficult and action-packed, and working as a landmark of how far you are from competition. To summarize, Riptus Rage is a really great game. It might not be a timeless classic because it doesn't offer anything different that we haven't seen before or since, but what it does it really good. It follows what a basic collectathon should be and add more on top of it, add more variety, more content, and that is something that we rarely see even today. It has this innocent charm that we often only find on Nintendo games. Sadly, the first game is not up to the challenge because it doesn't offer anything beyond the basic, but the sequel is full of fun and full of charm. The kind of game in which I just love to waste time on. It might not be a timeless classic or the best game ever made and might not be as remembered as the others, but it's a certain recommendation from me because Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage is definitely a great game. Oh, and by the way, I love these guys.
Who needs a key when you know how to chant like this?
They're just so fun.